Yeah, when you want like a proper meal that's going to sit
Mhm.
in your, I'm like, yeah, I want a pie. But of course, it takes 45 minutes and I'm going to be really hungry by the time we finish this. So I've said to Stuart, it's in there, it's ready. These are the settings. Please tiptoe in, put it on, and then leave.
This is when he tiptoes in to turn the air fryer on and like all chaos just happens and he drops it on the floor and there's a big bang in the background.
Fred runs around. It's absolute chaos. And I'm just there. I can't look at you. If I look at you, you'll distract me. So, yeah, I'm preempting my dinner.
Yeah. I had a pie last night because I just wanted something like that as well and something that I could just stick in. It would be really easy. Because I've had a really long day at work. I work days rather than nights the last 2 days. So,
There's no washing up as well with a pie.
unless it explodes in the air fryer.
I went through a phase of getting like all explosive pies. I was about to lose the will because there's nothing more annoying, is there? Than you're like, where's my filling on the pan?
Or a specific brand of pie is explosive.
I think if they're frozen, they're more likely to be explosive
Yeah, I could see that.
than the
I don't know
fresh.
why. I don't know what the science is behind that, but I can see
Yeah.
that.
But you're quite good at research, so I'll leave that with you.
Leave it to me, research into why do some pies explode and some don't. Actually, it does make me think I need to research this. So I have a cup of coffee here, and I had a cup of coffee in the last episode that we recorded. Okay. And same coffee, decaf, because I don't have caffeinated, in milk, soya milk. Okay. And
Same.
then I usually go for oat, but we've only got soya in. And then same honey. I like to put honey in my coffees. Okay. It's exactly the same. It's the same mug, everything, same kettle, whatever. First one that I had in the last episode curdled and did that. I don't know if you've ever,
Oh, yes. There's sometimes, yeah. With the soy milk does it, yeah.
sometimes soya milk, for whatever reason, in a coffee just curdle. And then this one hasn't. And I'm like, why? Because it's exactly the same. And in both of them, I just boiled the kettle and poured it straight in. And both of them, I stirred it quite vigorously. And that's it. I'm like, why is one curdled and one hasn't? And this has baffled me for so long. At one point, I thought, is it if you put the water in and it's too hot that it curdles? Or is it that it's the acidity of coffee that makes it curdle? And I still can't figure it out. It really bugs me.
Because I swear I remember reading about how if you put the milk in first, because it's soy milk. No, almond milk can be rubbish. I don't have almond milk in coffee. I have either soy milk or oat milk. Oat milk's fine. Soy milk sometimes curdles, and I've had that before. Where I've gone out places and I'm like, it's curdled. Why is it curdled? And it's so
Weird, isn't
gross.
it? No, I was gross. I just drank it.
Yeah, I would have. I can't be bothered to go make another one. It'll be fine. It's not going to kill me.
Exactly. But I just find it really baffling. So, there's anyone who's listening that understands why sometimes pies explode and sometimes they don't, and why sometimes soy milk curdles and other times it doesn't,
We'd
please
love to
enlighten
know.
us.
We would really love to know.
Yes.
We're sad like that.
Anyway, that's not what this topic of this episode is about, thrilling as it is. We are talking about intuitive eating this episode. So I think we've maybe mentioned intuitive eating as a concept previously, but we've not actually talked in depth about it at all, have we?
No, we haven't discussed the framework or anything to that extent. At what point in your recovery did intuitive eating enter for you?
I came in at that point where like what we've just discussed on the last episode about where I was a sponge wanting to absorb anything that was like non-diet. I was ready for that paradigm shift.
Yes.
So it came in at the perfect time for me. And it had been around much, much longer. I didn't discover it when it first came out. I came across it the time I needed to come across it.
Mm.
And I used elements of it. I think there's different approaches to using intuitive eating, isn't there? Like you say, it's a framework. It's a framework set up to help you move away from a diet mentality and to move more towards having self-trust around food. the framework looks at the emotional, psychological, social, behavioral, even biological processes that underline why we eat. And through working on those processes, it helps us to be more attuned to ourselves so we can have that better connection between our mind and bodies and more balanced relationship with trusting relationship with food. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of words to describe it, really.
No, I would agree. It's important that you say that because that's not what I thought it was. When I first heard about it, I heard about it and I didn't really do any sort of research beyond that. I just absorbed what other people were saying. So I think it'll be helpful in this episode. I think we're going to talk about the misunderstandings of intuitive eating. For me, for a very long time, I didn't start exploring intuitive eating until later on in recovery. So it was something I brought in later. But prior to that, what I thought intuitive eating was like the hunger fullness diet, essentially. That was my preconceived notion of what it was. It was this idea that you just eat when you're hungry, you stop when you're full. And then like you'll just know what to eat and it will just everything will fall into place.
Yeah.
Which is really difficult, can I just say, when you are someone who binges and restricts because your hunger and fullness cues are so out of whack that I used to find myself waiting and waiting to get hungry and not feeling hunger the way I thought I should through stomach hunger and missing other signals like fatigue and thinking about food and headache and things like that, going too far and then being so hungry and eating everything and thinking this isn't right for me. So that's just one of the things. When I first think of intuitive eating, that's what I thought it was. That's what I tried to put into practice. But because of my history of disordered eating and what I now know, actually that wasn't right for the context of where I was, I needed to do other things before that, or at least take into account my context before starting to explore it. And it ended up making me feel like I'm like, this is not for me. And just, no.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was nodding a lot throughout the whole thing that you said there. I was just like, yes.
I think this episode will be a lot of nodding.
Because I do think that is one of the myths around intuitive eating. And I mentioned that it's a framework. There's 10 principles, basically. And some people work through those 10 principles one after another and use it as like a complete guide, because there are workbooks where you could literally work through in each principle and do exercises for each principle. And they are laid out in the book in a suggested order of this is the order that we, the people who created it, propose might be a helpful order to do them in. So principles around nutrition and movement are towards the end of that framework, because there's certain things like rejecting the diet mentality and making peace with food that make more logical sense for you to work on first, because otherwise it's hard to bring in that nutrition if you haven't challenged your diet culture beliefs. Having said that, it isn't a rigid framework that you don't have to work through it in that order. You can work through different principles in an order that feels right for you. And you don't have to do them all. You can just be like, oh, that piece of information here really speaks to me and really resonates, and I'll use that. That's a really helpful guide. But I think going back to what you say about people thinking it's the hunger and fullness diet, I think the reason that misconception is because hunger and fullness is part of the framework, isn't it? So there is honor your hunger is one of the principles. And is it feel your fullness is the other one? I think it's feel your fullness. And there are exercises or tasks that you can do as part of intuitive eating, which is about trying to recognize when you are hungry and when you are full. But the purpose of it, my understanding is the purpose of that from an intuitive eating perspective is to help people become more attuned to their bodies and to develop that interoceptive awareness of what does hunger feel like for me? What does fullness feel like for me? And what's my reaction to hunger? What's my reaction to fullness? And how do I respond to that? So it's about attunement and embodiment. However, taken out of context, it can then just be misunderstood as if someone hasn't read the framework, seen it as the full picture of what it is. It can be taken the wrong way and it can be used as just another diet.
Yes.
And another way to try and lose weight, I only eat when I'm hungry and then I stop as soon as I'm full and then I'll lose weight, that kind of mentality.
Yes. Because, and I
Yeah.
think as well for someone like me, someone like you who relates to perfectionism, the expectation that putting that into practice means that it will go perfectly. Like you'll just know when you're hungry and you'll make the right decision and then you'll be able to stop when you're full. Well, with a history of binge eating and restriction, both physical and mental, you've got the mental hunger component there, which mental hunger for a lot of us, it's a blanket statement because everyone's context matters here, but it's something that you need to honor outside of what you may deem physical hunger. But then also, if you're someone who binges and has a history of going long periods without eating, then expecting yourself to stop the minute you start to feel full is a really big ask. Throughout a lot of the 6 months of recovery was eating past fullness. Because again, that mental hunger piece, although my body was full, my brain was not, and it needed to keep going. So all those factors that if you're not aware of that, it's going to feel like you're doing it wrong, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's going to feel like it needs to be done a certain way, and it's going to be met with this feeling of it's just not for me, it's not right for me, versus understanding how your body and your brain are going to react to it.
Yeah.
But I do also want to talk about what you did just say then, which was intuitive eating being seen as a weight loss.
Yeah.
I'll go back to that because that was something I made note of as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that part of it, using the hunger and fullness aspects of it as a weight management or a weight loss tool. But what is missed is if you take just hunger and fullness part of it, and not even those principles, but just literally just take the hunger or the fullness like exercises, because there is exercises where can you grade your hunger or your fullness from 1 to 10. If you simply don't read about intuitive eating or even read about that principle in fullness or the role it plays among all the other aspects, then yeah, people will use that as a tool to try and manage weight. But actually, when you look at it as a whole framework and a whole approach to non-dieting, there is other aspects in there. So sometimes it isn't about eating when waiting until it's not about eating when you're hungry, because there is also wisdom that comes into that and planning and forward thinking that actually, if I'm not going to be able to eat for the next God knows how many hours because I'm busy, then I'm going to eat now, even though I'm not hungry. So there's like that wisdom aspect that also comes into intuitive eating.
Yeah.
And satisfaction and social factors as well, that actually you might be in a social situation and you're enjoying socializing with people around food and something looks really good. And it's not about, I'm actually not hungry right now, so I won't eat that. It's about, no, food plays a role here and I am going to eat that. And I think a lot of that nuance to it is really missed when you just boil it down to hunger and fullness. The weight thing, if you want to go back to that, because obviously you mentioned like the weight loss or weight management tool, that is a myth that I see people talk about around intuitive eating, that if I can do intuitive eating, I will lose weight. And missing the point of what intuitive eating is, because intuitive eating is about being attuned to your body and connected to what your body's needs are and respecting that. Whereas if the goal is to lose weight, you've got your blinkers on thinking about a rigid outcome. And who knows, when you get to the point of intuitive eating, some people do lose weight, but some people also gain weight through it. And if you're attached on the outcome of weight loss, then are you really going to be able to fully practice intuitive eating? Because are you actually listening to your body's needs if that weight loss goal is always there for you?
Yes. For me personally, I don't think I could have recovered through the intention of following the intuitive eating principles because, yes, I think it would have felt like there was a desire for my weight to lower. There was a desire for weight loss. And I think that would have totally clouded everything else. But I also think that like my body needed to put on weight. Like you were saying about the hunger fullness, I needed to start eating regularly outside of those hunger cues in order to even get to a point where those hunger cues would kick in. because I didn't even have that. I've seen people online talking about it through intuitive eating, heal your relationship with food and lose weight at the same time. And it always gets my back up. And I'm sure there are people out there who are like, yeah, I healed my relationship with food and this happened and that, to each their own. But to me, it feels like there's a contradictory element there, because I
Yeah.
think so long as you are trying to lose weight or trying to keep your body a certain size, there's going to be some level of managing of food. And that's going to take you away from, like you were saying, being able to eat in a social element because you're with people and everyone's enjoying food and let's all share a dessert and oh my God, this tastes amazing and all that kind of stuff, like life moments.
Mhm.
Because there's that idea in the back of your head of, but my body may change. I probably shouldn't have that, which is why I think body image work goes along quite nicely in amongst
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, I think some people might do intuitive eating and actually that's everything that they need. Some people might take aspects of it and use other aspects of other things. Or some people might use the whole of the intuitive eating but need other stuff alongside it. It's so personal.
Mm.
But to go back to what you're saying there, where people are saying do intuitive eating and lose weight, my response to that is that's not true to intuitive eating, because intuitive eating has a principle around rejecting the diet mentality. So it's about challenging that belief that being slimmer is better or more desirable or healthier. And from that kind of, what kind of beliefs have we then got around food and the way we should eat or shouldn't eat based on putting thinness up on a pedestal? And it also has a principle around respect your body, which is about not trying to change your body, but respecting it as it is right now and making your body comfortable as it is right now and responding to its needs right now. Which actually, if you've got a long history of severe restriction and binging, responding to your body's needs is about giving it more food than you quote unquote think it should do, because it needs that. The body needs to know that its food is abundant and that it's safe. So actually, I would say that eating beyond fullness or in large quantities of food would actually be responding to what your body's needs are. So saying do intuitive eating and lose weight is ignoring those principles of intuitive eating, in my opinion.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Going actually against the whole point.
Yeah. But what I think is important to mention though is intuitive eating is like an anti-diet approach. It wasn't set up to help people with eating disorders. Like that, it wasn't like an eating disorder treatment. I think that's quite important to mention. However, having said that, there is a lot of studies now that do show how intuitive eating can be helpful for people with eating disorders. And there can be really good results from incorporating it into eating disorder treatment, but it's not in itself a standalone eating disorder treatment or created with that in mind. It was just to help people who have a history of dieting, who've become disconnected from their own body's needs, help them find a way back home to themselves and make peace with food and with their bodies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And movement as well, like that.
Yeah. That's important. I'm glad you said that.
Oh, I feel like I needed to exhale after that. I don't know why.
I'm just having a look at my notes, my quick notes that I made in our break about the other myths.
Do you have
You
another
can
myth that you want to
I
share?
have a few, but you can go first because I did the first one.
The myth that I've heard most and annoys me the most is the myth that intuitive eating is just a free for all, like eat what you want when you want kind of thing.
That was
You know,
next on my list.
as in, oh, I've had a thought that I'd like to have an ice cream. I'm gonna have it, and just constantly doing that. And I guess the way I understand this is the reason people have developed that is because of a misunderstanding around what intuition is,
Yeah.
and seeing that intuition is, oh, I'm going to follow that thought because I had that thought, I want to eat something. And I'm like, that's not really intuition because that's more impulse. That's
Yes.
reaction to something. Whereas intuition, I see, and what I understand as it in the context of intuitive eating is there is more wisdom behind intuition. So sometimes you might think, oh, I want an ice cream. And you connecting with your body, how is it feeling? You think about how your day's looking and you explore what's my reaction to that thought? Am I judging myself for that thought or all of this stuff? And then you make that decision. Do I want to eat
Mm-hmm.
it? Yes or no? So actually, in some situations, you might be like, oh, I've got that thought because I'm feeling really overwhelmed and really stressed.
Mm-hmm.
Will an ice cream actually help with that? You might end up eating the ice cream. You might actually, that did really help. And that's okay. But there's no judgment there and there's no guilt there because I've figured out that is actually what I needed to cope in this situation. Other times it might be like, no, I'm trying to avoid this feeling. And by having an ice cream, it might be my way of trying to avoid that feeling. So what would be better for me in this moment?
Yes. Yes.
Or it could be, I want an ice cream and there's nothing going on emotionally. I just really fancy one. But actually, I'm going to eat my dinner in an hour's time. So maybe I won't eat one because I might actually not enjoy my dinner as much. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll have something small. Like I might have just a couple of cubes of chocolate instead. And that will satisfy that kind of sweet thing that I want to tide me over until dinner. Do you know what I mean? There's so much
Yes.
more
Yeah.
nuance and depth to intuition than I think people give credit to. And the idea of I'll just eat what I want when I want doesn't cover any of that.
No, okay, so I agree with everything you just said. I think exactly right. The power of independent thought around food. But there is that like devil's advocate part of me that wants to say that like in the beginning of recovery, there was a lot of thinking about food and then just eating the food without thinking much more about it.
Yeah.
That, though, was because I had come from a place of very heavy restriction. And that was how I was practicing permission. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
came alongside it as well. It wasn't like it didn't feel like a free for all because I still had meal structure. The narrative in my head was practicing giving myself permission and letting myself eat. So there wasn't like a eating for the sake of eating or numbing out from food. So that was different. It wasn't this, oh, I'm eating everything in sight. There was still, as I say, there was meal times, but there was times where I would have dessert before dinner because that's what I wanted and that's what I needed to do in recovery. And that's how I needed to practice permission, but it was temporary. Once I had done that, then I could start looking at, as you were saying, okay, do I need to have this cookie before dinner? Can I have dinner and I can absolutely have the cookie or however many cookies I want afterwards, but let's have dinner first and then let's check back in and see how it feels. I
Yeah.
don't think I could have done the latter if I hadn't have been able to give myself permission. But then we won't go
Mm-hmm.
too far into this because this is talking on a tangent about what permission is and the misunderstanding of permission. We've already done an episode on that. So just go to the permission episode with Sarah because that will help you
Yes.
on that. But even me saying that is very much similar to what you were saying in the like nuance of what
Yeah.
is right in your context.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's good that you've mentioned that. I would have played devil's advocate a little bit here in response to that because the way I perceive intuitive eating and what you've just said is I still think that's part of intuitive eating because if you at that point in your recovery, psychologically and physically, you needed to just respond to that and eat that ice cream before dinner because that was your part of making peace with food. That is one of the principles to be able to make peace with food and not having good, bad foods and demonizing certain foods over others and having guilt around food. Maybe actually at that point, you needed to eat that. And that was you
Mm-hmm.
practicing that principle of
Mm-hmm.
making peace with food. And then at a different point in your recovery, other principles might have been more helpful for you. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, but this is it, isn't it? This is the crux of this episode, isn't it? I think the mistake can be thinking intuitive eating is another set of rules that you need to follow
Mhm.
versus here's a concept. How does this work for me right now?
Yeah.
and it doesn't always have to look like this, but this is how I can practice it, or at least experiment with it and see how it feels. Because then there's also the idea of you might not need all principles. It might be that there's some principles that you can't really go near yet, and that's okay, and that it's not something you need to do in order. It's far
Yeah.
more flexible than I think people necessarily realize.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like you've hit the nail on the head there, really. And I think something I made a note of, as I think is a myth that people have, that it is another set of rules to follow and it's just another diet. And it's that it's quite rigid when people view it that way, that actually make peace with food looks like this, honor your fullness looks like this, honor your hunger
Yeah.
looks like this. Actually, honoring my hunger as someone who's had a history of restriction and binging might look very different to someone honoring their hunger who hasn't had that history, but has still had some disordered relationship around food. And I think it's about not putting it into a box of it having to look a certain way and be done in a certain way. To go back to what you said around perfectionism, that if you are a perfectionist or you've had a long history of dieting, if you approach intuitive eating as another set of rules, it's going to become very tricky because you're going to fall into thinking that you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong, that you're a failure if something happens like a certain way. So, for example, take the ice cream that you might eat it before dinner and then have your dinner and realize actually that wasn't what I needed. Or you might have not eaten it before dinner, then had your dinner and gone, do you know what? I think I should have had the ice cream before dinner. That would have been the right thing. If that happens from an intuitive eating lens, that actually isn't failure. That's you learning about yourself. It's a
Mhm.
learning about what your needs are. That's what it's there to do, to help you learn and develop this relationship with food that is more personalized to you.
Mhm.
Whereas if you approach it thinking that it's a set of rules that you can get right or wrong, you're going to berate yourself and think, oh, I did it wrong. I didn't do intuitive eating right
Yes.
there
Yes.
because I did or didn't eat the ice cream and I should have done the opposite.
Yes. Just for anyone that's listening, and I think about my own experience, and Becca, I'm sure you'll completely relate to this, I assume. When you are coming from a place of disordered eating, and as a result, you have a real disconnect and lack of trust for your body, I so understand wanting intuitive eating to be not only something that fix it, but as a set of rules that you can follow and that will
Mm.
give you your desired outcome, because there is something so scary about going from being very rigid with food and having so many rules around food and not trusting yourself around food to then trying to be like, okay, this could be anything then. I can make this look how I want, but I don't know what that is. And that's why I think for me, it was helpful to have structure with food,
Yeah.
with meals, because to me, it wasn't a rule. It was just something for me to feel like I was following something and it was grounding for me versus it feeling like that. Oh my God, this is so overwhelming. I could go anywhere because this is it. When the trust has been broken, it's a really big ask to expect yourself to embrace this and surrender to it when it is something that it's very experimental, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. I think experimental is a good word to use with it. Yeah. Experimental, flexible. I fully agree with you on that. That when you have lost so much trust in yourself, to say, this is here is something that you can use as a guide, but be flexible with it.
Yeah. Do with it what you want. Enjoy.
Like, it's not, you don't have to follow it. It's just there as a guide and take what works and leave the rest and personalize it. That feels petrifying because you're like, what? No,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't have that trust in myself to do that.
Yeah.
Also, on the flip side of that, the irony really of going, no, I want a set of rules to tell me what to do to have self trust is actually quite ironic, but we've all been there.
Such that like black and white thinking as well, isn't it? It's like, it needs to be this, it needs to be this. And the fact that it's, I need you to tell me exactly what I need to do, point by point, so that I can just trust and surrender to my body. It's just, yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
Great observation there, Becca. See, we just don't
quite
make any
funny.
sense, do we? We're complex creatures.
And I think the idea of taking intuitive eating as a set of rules that you need to follow is very much like, I'm going to stay within the paradigm of diet culture.
Mm,
And I see this within that paradigm. Whereas actually I see intuitive eating as like something that helps you completely move away from that paradigm
Mhm.
into a new paradigm. It's like tool that can be used to help you make that paradigm shift. Whereas seeing it as a rigid set of rules to follow, it's still sticking in the old place. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's still continuing this idea that there's a certain way that you need to eat, or the way that your relationship with food should look versus how it really feels for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what's quite interesting though? So I did the intuitive eating counseling like webinar
Mm.
training this year, and they are currently like revising it. So it's I don't know how has it been revised 4 times now?
They do continue to expand and evolve it, don't
Yeah.
they?
So I think they'll be moving into the 5th revision. And Evelyn, who was running the training, said that in this new revision, they're going to put a stronger focus on sufficiency and importance on like sufficiency of food, which actually I'm really keen to see what that looks like, given what you've said around actually sometimes it isn't just about listening to your hunger and fullness. Sometimes we need more. And I'm wondering
Yeah.
if that is part of what's leading them to move towards sufficiency as a stronger focus. Oh.
Oh, that'll be really interesting. 'Cause I
Hmm.
think it's true. I think
I hope I was allowed to say that.
you're giving us all the details. I'm assuming they didn't make you sign an NDA then. 'Cause
No,
if
they
you did, you
didn't.
just broke it. With intuitive eating, I'm thinking about like the gentle nutrition a principle. I used to think I would get to a point where I wouldn't have as much of an appetite. I wouldn't need to eat as much food. And this is obviously on the back of you talking about sufficiency with food, because I think for a lot of us, we don't realize how much food we actually need. Like on a daily basis, regardless of your activity levels, like I eat a lot of food. I eat a lot of food. I'm recovered. My body feels safe around food, and I still eat a lot of food. I think with the gentle nutrition principle, I think people can bring it in too soon. People
Mhm.
can maybe try and do it first,
Yeah.
perhaps with the idea this will mean that I'll eat really healthy and I'll lose weight. But this idea that, and also that gentle nutrition perhaps looks like eating clean, so to
Mm.
speak, and eating less of certain foods. And for me, it was more about adding more variety of food
There's a reason they are placed
toward the end.
and in the structure because if some of the diet mentality hasn't been addressed, exactly what you're describing can happen, where
Mm.
people can bring in nutrition thinking with a goal of weight loss, which is not really focused on nutrition, then is it? Or it can become quite rigid,
Yeah.
like you say, with clean eating, which actually leads quite nicely to something that I wanted to share around intuitive eating, the principle that probably for me had the biggest impact, or I found the most helpful. And everyone's going to find different things helpful, but for me, it was the principle around challenge the food police.
Mm.
And I love this concept. And so the concept of challenge the food police was challenging these internalized kind of messages and voices that we have around food, which sees food as like good or bad or having some morality to it and these rigid diet rules, basically. And I think the reason I really liked it is because the challenge the food police principle talks about actually names the voices that you would have in your head. I'm going to look at them to make sure I actually name them
Mhm.
correctly. There's 2 clusters. There's a destructive food voices, which is the food police is one of them. The food police is the one that has like those diet rules around morality. For example, one that I had was can't eat 2 types of carbs in a day.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
was a really rigid rule I had. And yeah, so that would be an example of the food police voice. Then there would be the nutrition informant, which is, I think, the voice that you are alluding to a little bit here when
Mhm.
you say about it is based on nutrition, but it's nutrition in a very like fearful, rigid way.
Toxic
So
wellness culture.
yeah. So
Yeah.
one that I had was like, I'm talking aside from ethical reasons here, but I was like, meat is unhealthy. Like to eat meat is unhealthy. And I know some people choose not to eat meat for ethical reasons. That's a very different story. We'll get into that. But the belief I had was actually eating meat is unhealthy because of the fats in it and stuff like that. So that was fueled by nutrition around what the nutritional content was of that food. And then one of the other destructive voices is the diet rebel, which I think we've also touched on in previous episodes, that kind of rebellion, which would be or could be part of the reason why people binge. It's that pushback against all of these rules and restrictions that are put on us to be like, you know what? Who cares? I'm tired. I'm fed up. I'm going to eat all of this. And it's that real pushback, but in a chaotic way and in a way that's actually quite destructive, like harmful to us. And then there are intuitive eating voices as well. But the reason, and I can go into them if you think it's helpful, but the reason I found this principle particularly helpful is because it was the first introduction I think I actually had to like parts work and the idea that I have these different parts that are working inside me. And there's a reason why I have the food police voice, and there's a reason why I have the nutrition informant and the diet rebel. And it helped me recognize them and helped me actually be able to step back a little bit and witness them rather than just like following them.
Yes.
A bit like the first time I did meditation and started like observing my thoughts and realizing, "Oh, there's lots of thoughts going on here. It's very busy. There's lots of things." But being able to see that and recognize I can be separate from those thoughts and like, I can choose which thoughts I give more or less attention to.
Yeah.
I think that's why this principle really helped me. So it was like not just something that's abstract. It was actually a real practical tool that I could use day to be like, oh, that voice is popping up here and that voice is popping up there.
Yeah, because until we start to identify and separate what we've got going on, it all just feels like it's just ours and the
Mhm.
way that it should be and the way that we should think about food. It's not until we start to break it down. So much of recovery is breaking things down before you can rebuild from the ground up. And I had the same experience in terms of challenging the food police. One of the most imperative and helpful tools that I had to do at the very beginning. I don't think I could have gotten any further until I did
Mhm.
that because, as you say, intuitive eating would have become like toxic wellness vibes for
Yeah.
me. It would have been, I would have had the illusion that it was intuitive eating and it was healthy, but there would have still been a lot of rules, but it would have felt like it was disguised under the name of wellness. And it would have been quite sticky. To a certain degree, it would have still been disordered eating. It would have just looked
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. Yeah. And wellness can be sneaky like that. And when it comes to the challenging the food police principle and those voices, like the nutrition informant, which is really rigid and isn't really for it's using concepts of health, but in a very rigid, fearful way. Idea is about moving away from that and moving it towards, I think it's the nutrition ally, what can help you by recognizing what nutritional content there is in foods and whether that's helpful for you. But it's not just focused on quote unquote health in the what is the nutritional content. It's also focused on satisfaction
Yeah.
with that health. And it's flexible as well. So it doesn't mean I'm always going to eat this because this is quote unquote the healthiest, has the most nutritional content. It might actually be like, I'm going to eat this sometimes, but other times I'm going to eat this, or I might have both. Like it's the nutrition ally voice has much more movement to it.
Yes, there's a reason it's called gentle nutrition because I think it is something you have to tread lightly with. I definitely in recovery tried to incorporate it too soon and did not go well. Like
Yeah.
immediate resistance. And I could tell, I was like, this is a slippery slope. This could so easily send me straight back by trying to incorporate this
Yeah.
far too soon.
For me as well, and we both discussed about that kind of all-in approach we had. And I think we spoke about in the permission episode with Sarah that my approach with nutrition was it's not even an issue. It's not something that's on the table right now. I'm purely focusing on unlearning kind of these beliefs around these foods and being comfortable with them, making peace with them, getting rid of the shame or the guilt around them. And then later down the line, I will bring back in that nutrition. But again, it's gentle. It's not about swinging back the other way.
Mhm.
I think sometimes like you have to do this. Is if you, it's like the pendulum swing concept. I don't know who created it
I
or
was just about to say that. I
I
remember,
wish I knew.
I know someone with such a great visual. You're loving a visual aid these days, and I love that for you. You're in your visual aid era. Pendulum swing.
But yeah, it's this pendulum's been all the way over here because we've been so rigid in only eating in the clean way. It's highly based on nutritional content. We're going to have to swing the complete opposite way where none of that matters before you can land into that middle ground where
Yes.
they both hold value.
Yes. And as we say, this is why I think that you get to decide what principles to explore when there's time for all of them. You may not need all of them as well.
And the people who actually created this framework say that as well. Like they outright say it's not a rigid framework.
Yeah.
Use it how you need to use it as well. Yeah. Did you want to say anything else?
I was just having a look at my notes. I don't know why, I find it really interesting that I make notes on my computer and you handwrite, don't you?
I do handwrite my
But yet
notes.
when we're talking, I'm writing.
Yeah. See, I can't do that, like looking at a screen, talking to someone and having notes. I get really confused with, if I had another screen there, I could, if I had two screens, because I could look at you and have the other screen. But having like minimizing the faces and then bringing up notes and doing that, I don't know, I just find that
Too much. It's too much to do.
too much. It's just, yeah, too confusing.
I don't think there's anything. I did just make a note that said, thinking it will be easy or feel natural straight away.
Okay.
I think we have touched on that. It's asking you to be flexible and it's asking you to, as I said, see it like more of an experiment with food of like sometimes things work and sometimes it doesn't. And we learn from our decisions around food all the time. Like even now, as someone like me who would say I have a quote unquote normal relationship with food, I still eat things and I'm like, oh, I'm a bit too full now. Probably could have stopped 3 bites ago. Like there's no finite point that you get to where things feel perfect and your relationship with food feels great and that you just never really have to think about it again, because I think it's always something that you evolve with. I think because of the word intuitive, to me feels similar to that kind of alignment, that it feels like it's just going to be easy and it's just going to flow, that it's okay if it doesn't look like that. It's okay if it feels a bit all over the place and you maybe try a principle and think, oh, that threw me a bit. I don't think I'm ready for that one. That I'm going to put that on the back, but I don't need to go there. I'm maybe going to stick with just this for now. It really is something for you to approach with, I'm going to say that damn word again, flexibility. Flexibility.
When you said that, it's not necessarily going to be easy, but people have the misconception that it will be easy. It made me wonder if, should I have a sneezes coming on? Hang on.
Look at the light.
I'm looking at the light. It's
You've
not
lost
happening.
it.
Okay.
You've lost it. I'm so
Lost
sorry.
it, but I can still feel it in my nose. It's really annoying. It's okay. Sorry, listeners. What I was going to say is when people think it should be easy, it makes me wonder if part of that is because sometimes intuitive eating can be spoken about in a way of we're stripping back everything that all the conditioning that you've had to bring you back to like your childlike state before you'd had all that messaging shoved on you and you built all these beliefs. Children are born intuitive eaters. Like that could make someone feel like this should be easy then, because this is something that actually is very innate to me. I was born like this and it's very natural.
Yeah.
It's just in me. It's really natural. It should be easy because it's who I am at my core. And actually, I don't think it's as simple as that, because unlearning conditioning and beliefs and messaging, and also largely just being doing something different to what a lot of other people around you are doing is really fucking hard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even if it is quote unquote the most natural way of being, it doesn't make it. It doesn't mean it's an easy thing to achieve or to be consistent with. The other aspect of that I thought of is what you're saying, it should look like this. It should be very aligned. It should be perfect. Is those unrealistic expectations we put on ourselves that it's a relationship with food that we're developing here and working on. And I've always referred to as a relationship with food. And Will said to me at one point, I don't really understand what you mean by a relationship with food. Like, how do you have a relationship with food? This was quite early on in our relationship. But now, after years of being together, he's like, I get what you mean how by a relationship with food. But if we take that word relationship and think about it in other aspects of like your relationship with your partner, your relationship with your family or your friends, that never looked consistent and the same. Some days you get along better, other days you don't. Sometimes you say something and then you regret it, or it's a really variable thing. It's not a constant. That relationship does not look constant. Sometimes you're closer and sometimes you're not. And if we can start to see food as we have a relationship with food, then we can start to move away from that feeling that it has to be perfect. Because just like our relationships everywhere else in life, they're gonna fluctuate in how easy it feels or how challenging it feels or what we need day to day.
That was wonderful. I was mesmerized by that.
Really?
I thought that was fantastic.
Cute. That's very honest.
The fact that Will was like, I don't understand what you mean by a relationship with food. That's probably because he had a normal relationship with food. Like, you don't
You know,
understand the conflict. You just exist with food. It's not a thing. That's why.
do you know what though? Actually, Will has had his own his own kind of disordered eating issues. But it wasn't until we started talking about it as like a relationship with food and having more conversations that actually I think he realized that.
Oh,
Which
so you gave him some understanding. You enlightened him.
maybe. No, I wouldn't go that far.
Take it. Take the win. He's not here to deny it. So just take it.
Which actually I think is quite an important point to make, that I think people can just think that the relationship with food is quote unquote normal because so much that's disordered is normalized.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Which is why it's so difficult when you start thinking about food rules. That's why I think that for me, that's one of the most important principles to explore.
Yeah, that was my challenging the food, please. My favorite principle. So if you've been listening and you have tried intuitive eating, we'd love to hear how you found that. Has it been helpful? If so, which principle or principles do you find the most useful? And also, what kind of myths have you maybe held around intuitive eating? So there's a lot of them out there.
Oh, yeah. For anyone who also is interested in exploring intuitive eating, Sarah Dosan, who was on the podcast not long ago, does a intuitive eating blueprint course that she runs a couple of times a year. I think she's running it again in September. I should know the exact dates because I help do the admin and stuff for it. So if
by the time this comes out, it will be September.
So it'll be towards the end of September, I think. Obviously, I've sat through the course and it's very good and it's really helpful. And I think it's one of the few out there that's approaching it in a way that's really just about making it work for you.
Yeah.
So if anyone's interested, Sarah will be advertising that. It's already on her website, I think.
Yeah, I haven't sat through it or anything, but I know it's Sarah's spoken to her and I know it's very different. It's not like I'm here to teach you about the principles. No. It's very much about you developing your relationship to those principles and personalizing it.
Yeah, it's very good. I mean, I know I'm biased because she's my friend, but she's a natural at that kind of thing. She's good. But yes, let us know your thoughts, people. We always like to hear from you. And we will see you in the next one.
We will do. Bye.
Bye.